Everybody hear that? So now this is being recorded, and yes, just a reminder: keep your video and audio off so that we have the best streaming situation. And if you have questions, feel free to post them in the chat. I have this other computer right here, and I'll be keeping an eye on that, and I'll just flag you, Caitlin, whenever there's a question, or if there's a question here in the room, just raise your hand. And with that, I think I'm ready to turn it over to Caitlin for the wonderful world of seed.
Okay, great. Thank you so much, Laura. Hello, everybody, and thanks for taking some time out of your afternoon on a Saturday to listen to me talk about seed saving. And you see this first slide that I have up here, and very simple, be a seed saver. And obviously, we're all here today because we're interested in saving seeds. And I just want you to take a second and think about, why it is that you're drawn to seed saving work. And during that time, I'll tell you a little bit about my story and coming to this kind of work. So I started gardening in my early 20s, and it soon led to seed saving. And I think that for a lot of people, that becomes a natural progression. And I started collecting what I call pocket seeds. And that's, you're out and about, maybe in town, walking by a bush that's going to seed, and you start collecting them and stuffing them in your pockets. And today on our farm, that manifests especially during the fall, when our beans are becoming ripe, and I'm breaking open bean pods and stuffing them in my pockets. And so pocket seeds are kind of a thing among seed savers, and you'll hear other seed savers talk about pocket seeds, and they kind of come out of my pockets and get dumped on my windowsill every day during seed harvest season. So my point is that I think for a lot of gardeners, seed saving is just a natural thing that we're drawn to do. It's like you're drawn to learning about the whole cycle of the plant. But of course, there are a lot of other good reasons to be saving seeds today. And it is so inspiring to see seed libraries opening up in Northern California, with the Colusa County Library, and then Redding also has a brand new seed library. And in the past, I have attended big agricultural conferences where people give presentations that talk about how few multinational corporations actually own most of the seed supply in the world. And so that is a huge reason for me that to save seeds, and that everybody needs to save seeds. And it's really one of my missions that every gardener is also a seed saver, because you need to have the means to feed yourselves. And also, in the face of climate change, varieties that are adaptable to microclimates are going to become more and more important. And so if all of us are saving the seeds from, this cantaloupe that I have up there on the slide, well, over the years, it's going to change a little bit for people who are growing it up in the mountains versus people who are growing it down in the valley where it's so hot, and you'll select seeds and fruits that do better in your microclimate. And it'll make the whole food chain more resilient. So there are a lot of good reasons to save seeds, and I'm really happy that so many people are joining us today. So I'm going to go on to the next slide here. Oh, I pushed the button and it didn't. Oh, there we go. Okay. So I started saving seeds in my early 20s, and when we were drawn to farming, my husband and I, and instead of growing vegetables, we decided to grow seeds. And we started out growing seeds on contract for other seed companies. Started doing that, I think, in about 2007. And for a couple of years, we grew seeds on contract for the likes of Seeds of Change and Fedco Seeds. And that was a great experience, but we really soon realized that if we wanted to make a living doing this, then turning to a packet business would be the way to go. So we started selling seeds under our own label in 2009. And now you'll see our seeds on seed racks all through Northern California. We're in about 65 different store locations this year, and then also sell our seeds online. And I like to attend farmers markets and festivals in the summer too. I think this photo here is from the Chico Farmers Market. So I wrote that up there again, that our mission is really to provide gardeners with education. I'm all about that, and really good plant varieties that are going to do well in the Mediterranean California region. Of course, people then ask, well, will your seeds do well in Ohio? Or, and the reality is that yes, like seeds, just because they're growing in one microclimate doesn't mean that they're not going to do well elsewhere. Generally, but we do try to select varieties that really hold up to the extreme heat that we see in California, and then also to short seasons, because we're actually growing our seeds up at 2,500 feet in the foothills. So that is another climate concern there. So, and then my other goal is just that every gardener is also a seed saver. And so that's where classes like these and the seed libraries are so important. So I'm just going to get into it now. Before we go too much further, I want to talk about some of the vocabulary that I'll be using today. And I feel like there's a lot of maybe just misunderstanding around the term heirloom. The heirloom is a real kind of buzz term these days, and it's a really important concept, heirlooms. Essentially an heirloom variety is something that's old. It's been around for hundreds, maybe thousands of years. It's been saved by family over generations and generations. And today, though, heirlooms are really varieties that have been around before 1950, about is the cutoff. And that's because around 1950 is when more hybrid varieties became commercially available. But for seed saving purposes, heirloom is really important. You can save seeds from any heirloom variety, but it's really the term that you're going to be looking for is open pollinated. So an open pollinated variety means that you can use basic seed saving methods, and those varieties will produce true to type seeds. And so by default, all heirloom varieties are open pollinated. However, not all open pollinated varieties are heirloom. So that means that there's a lot of really good varieties that have been developed just in the last, 10 years, 20 years, 30 years that aren't heirlooms, or they're not heirlooms yet. Maybe, maybe in a couple hundred years, they'll still be around. But there are many, many really passionate, independent seed breeders in the States right now, and worldwide too, but who are using just regular seed saving and plant breeding methods. They're not doing GMOs, they're not doing hybrids, and so they are actively developing new varieties that are going to stand up to climate change, or varieties that can compete in the seed market. Yeah, do you have a question, Laura?
Yeah, there's a question in the chat, and I'm glad someone posted it because I was thinking the same thing. Can you define and explain true to type?
Yes. Yeah. Yes, for sure. So that just means that if I grow Chadwick cherry tomatoes and I save the seeds from those Chadwick cherry tomatoes, and then when I plant them next year, I'm going to get Chadwick cherry tomatoes. It means that the seeds that you save will actually produce the same variety. It's going to be a stable variety, because the other flip side of that is a hybrid. So that's my other term there, is a F1 hybrid. And so that's like, sun gold cherry tomatoes that everybody loves. They're so tasty and sweet. But if you grow sun gold cherry tomatoes and then save the seeds from them and then replant them the next year, they're not going to grow into sun gold cherry tomatoes, because they're an F1 hybrid. And so the F1 means you know, a hybrid is created by two different parent varieties. So we don't know what the parent varieties of Sungold are. That's the intellectual property of the corporation that created that hybrid. And so they just keep making that hybrid and selling those because they sell so well. But when you cross two parent varieties to get that F1, it's a stable cross. And every time you make that cross, it's going to produce that same Sungold. But then when you save seeds from that F1 and you grow it out in what's called the F2 generation, that's when you see the genetic diversity. And you're going to see maybe 10 different types of tomatoes. You might see some that kind of resemble Sungolds, but you might see some big ones or some red ones, or, you know, and then plant breeders do that on purpose. Like if you're a plant breeder, you make that cross, you get the F1, you grow it again, you see the genetic diversity, and then you start selecting for the traits that you would want. And you repeat that process over maybe 5 to 7 years until you come up with a new variety. And that would be using traditional plant breeding. But for us, for seed savers, if you're going to save seeds, don't save seeds from hybrids, is my big message. You have to save seeds from open pollinated varieties to get true to type seed. And I see this a lot with people who tell me, oh, hey, Caitlin, I saved these seeds from this great squash I got at the farmer's market, you know, or I saved these seeds from this cantaloupe that I got at the grocery store. It's organic, you know, but just because it's organic doesn't mean it's not a hybrid. You know, there's lots of organic hybrids, and most commercial farmers use hybrids because they do tend to produce, sometimes they're more productive and they're more uniform. You know, open pollinated varieties can have more genetic diversity, whereas a farmer might want every cantaloupe to be the same, and so they choose the hybrid. And so as seed savers, you need to seek out open pollinated varieties. So the other two, I hope that clarified the true to type issue. The other two terms there are annual and biennial. So, you know, annual plants are plants that are going to produce their seed in one growing season, like lettuce, like tomatoes, like peppers. A biennial is a plant that is going to produce their seed in 2 growing seasons. So you would plant it in like early summer or spring, or sometimes even, you know, early fall, and then it needs to go through a cold cycle to produce its seed. And so a lot of examples of those are carrots, or beets, or kale, broccoli. Most of the brassicas are like that. And with biennial plants, like carrots, for example, if you were to plant carrots right now, and then it gets real cold, and then some of them, like a quarter of your carrots, go to seed because they're like, oh, it got cold, I'm going to make seeds. And you save those seeds, you're going to actually be selecting for carrots that go to seed early. And so it needs to go through that actual winter cycle. All right. Anybody have questions on those? Okay. So we'll move on to pollination. And this is a biggie. So basically with seed-bearing plants, they can be put into 2 categories for seed-saving purposes. You have either outbreeders or inbreeders, or also known as self-pollinated plants. And so I have this diagram of the plant parts there, and you'll see the seed-bearing part is in the middle with the ovaries and the stigma and the style, and collectively that part is known as the pistil. And then you have the filament in the anther, and that's where the pollen is. That's the pollen-bearing part, and those are known as the stamens. And so that flower that you see there is a perfect flower. It has all of the seed-bearing and the pollen-bearing plant parts. Now, in some plants, the outbreeders, they need insects or the wind to move the pollen from the stamens to the pistil to fertilize the seeds and to produce seeds. So that needs wind or insects. Those are outbreeders. But the inbreeders, or the self-pollinated plants, they can pollinate themselves without insects or without wind. Sometimes like they need maybe some gentle agitation like the plants do, but not much. That usually occurs out in a garden. So that would be like a tomato flower. All the parts are touching inside of the flower and it pollinates itself. So, move on to that. So here we go. Good examples of self-pollinated plants. These are really the big ones here that are pretty simple to save seeds from, are a really good place for beginners to start. Your lettuce, tomatoes, and your legumes, your beans and peas. So the great thing about self-pollinated varieties is that they don't actually cross-pollinate very easily. And so they don't need a very large isolation distance in your garden. And I'm going to definitely talk more about isolation distances. And your seeds can be saved from small populations with good results. So again, like with lettuce, they're lettuce flowers, they're perfect flowers. They have all the parts and they basically pollinate themselves before they even open. So if you've ever watched a lettuce plant go to seed, you know, they get really tall and they flower, all these little yellow flowers, and new flowers open every morning. And then by the time it heats up, the flowers wilt. And then they turn to seed. You know, they go to seed and they get these little furry little tufts on them when the seed is ripe. But because they're only open for a very short time, they don't cross-pollinate very easily. Like if you grew two big patches of two different kinds of lettuce right next to each other, you might get a little bit of crossing where they meet. And seed breeders will do that on purpose when they're trying to create new lettuce varieties. And then likewise with tomatoes, the tomato flower structure is actually quite closed. And so insects don't penetrate it very easily and they self-pollinate. The exception is some of the potato leaf varieties of tomatoes can cross a little easier because the stigma actually sticks out of the flower a little more. And then also with beans and peas, if you've seen a bean or a pea flower, it's that bilabiate, like has that big keel shape on it. And those are really closed. And so it's hard for insects to penetrate and to get in to do any cross-pollination. So yeah, for home seed savers and for folks saving seeds for seed libraries, these are really good places to start. And then we'll talk about the outbreeders next. The outbreeders are definitely a little more complicated. You have to really start paying attention to isolation distances and scientific names. And I'm going to talk about scientific names next. But you can see I've just popped pictures up here of different varieties that are definitely outbreeders. So your melons and your cucumbers and your squashes. In fact, all of the cucurbits in the Cucurbitaceae family are outbreeders. They'll cross-pollinate very easily. Sunflowers, all of your brassicas, your onions, your carrots, your corn, beets. And so I put the beets and the corn off to one side of the screen, and that's because those are actually wind pollinated. And so instead of insects moving pollen, the wind does. And so that is a reason for sometimes increased isolation distances for those crops. You know that insects can fly up to a couple of miles, and wind can actually blow corn pollen quite a long way.
Hey, Kaylin, can you pause for a second?
Yep.
Maybe just turn up your laptop for now. Just let it.
We had really good audio and then the Bluetooth cut out.
Okay.
But now I'm not hearing anything. Just a second.
No problem.
She could just go ahead.
Can you guys hear if we just use the laptop audio? Okay.
Can you hear me? Yeah.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay.
Okay. We'll be very quiet in the room so that we hear you. Sorry for the interruption. Go ahead.
All right. So on that same note, with self-pollinated, these crops are self-pollinated, but they are easily crossed. So that would be peppers and eggplants. And that's because although they're self-pollinated, the flower structure stays open for a longer amount of time, and the flower structure is just more open. You can kind of see in that picture there, the eggplant flower, you know, it's very obviously open, and insects will easily cross-pollinate these. And so you don't need to isolate them like as far as you would corn or squash, but in our seed saving gardens, I usually isolate them by 150 to 300 feet in the garden. And so, oh, sorry. Oops, I'm getting messed up on my slides, guys. There we go. Okay. Here's a couple more terms too. When it comes to pollination, I talked about what a perfect flower is, and that just means that it actually contains, you know, all of the pollen bearing and the seed bearing parts, also known as male and female parts. So examples of plants with perfect flowers are tomatoes, your lettuce, your brassicas, legumes, sunflowers, and onions. And then there are some plants that actually have the pollen and the seed bearing flowers on separate plants. So examples of those, you know, spinach, cannabis, willow, date palm, and ginkgo biloba are kind of well-known ones. And then others have, the term is monoecious, and honestly, you don't need to memorize those terms. But that's where the pollen and the seed bearing flowers, they're separate, but they're on the same plants. So examples of that are like your cucumbers and your melons, your squash, your corn. And a lot of people will notice that, you know, with squash, you often get a lot of male flowers. And then finally you start getting female flowers with like baby squashes on the bottom. Are there some questions in the chat? I see there's like 6 somethings in the chat up there.
No, that we were just chatting that the audio works well for the Zoom participants. It was
Okay.
just our room audio that went out briefly.
Okay.
But we're
Okay.
all good.
Okay, great. All right, great. So it is important, you know, when you're seed saving to figure out how the crop that you're trying to save seeds from, how it pollinates, you know. What is going on with the flowers, and does it need insects? Is it self-pollinated? Is it an outbreeder? Those are some of the first things that you'll want to find out about the crop that you're going to save seeds from. So we'll move on to scientific names, because that's another huge part of the puzzle. And, you know, scientific names are also known as your Latin names by botanical classifications. And again, you know, you don't really have to memorize these things. You can look them up. You can always look it up. Like, what is the scientific name of, you know, dark star zucchini? Or find a good reference book, which I'll link you to a couple at the end of this. So this picture here, it has 6 different squashes on it. And you can see that 4 of them are summer squash and 2 of them are winter squash. There's a pumpkin there. There's a candy stick delicata. That's dark star zucchini, Lebanese summer squash, golden zucchini, and a yellow crookneck. And those are all Cucurbita pepo. So those are all the same scientific name. They're all Cucurbita pepo. And so because they all share the same genus and species, they can easily cross-pollinate. So to get more into that, genus and species. So when you look at a scientific name, the first part is the genus and the second part is the species. And so for example, with squash, there are 3 main squash species that we grow on our farm that are probably the most common species of squashes. So Cucurbita pepo, which I mentioned before. So an example of that is dark star zucchini. You got Cucurbita moschata. Example of that is Waltham butternut. So the moschatas are definitely usually like kind of butternut types. And then Cucurbita maxima, an example of that would be our Oregon Homestead sweetmeat. And usually the maxima, sometimes some of them can be kind of pumpkins. Often it's like the blue-skinned squashes, the Hubbards, the kabochas are your maximas. So But in a seed saving garden, it's great because you can actually grow these 3 species of squash all at the same time in the same garden area, and they're not going to cross-pollinate. But if you were to grow like 2 varieties of Cucurbita pepo next to each other in the garden, or even like 20 feet apart, they can definitely cross-pollinate because insects will absolutely fly back and forth. And so that's a consideration. You have to think about where you're growing your seeds. Like if you are an urban gardener and your neighbors across the fence also grow a big garden, then and you want to save seeds, then it's going to be a little more difficult. You might have to resort to some hand pollination, and that's not going. I'm not going to get into that so much in this class. Or you need to coordinate with your neighbors for what they're growing, you know, maybe get everybody on board to save seeds, and you can all grow a different variety of each species, and then share the seeds amongst yourselves and share the fruits too. So with this cross-pollination issue, I do want people to understand that because I feel like this is a question I get sometimes, that, you know, even if you were to grow, you know, 5 different Cucurbita pepos, like it doesn't affect the fruits. You know, it doesn't affect the cross-pollination that's going to occur. It's not going to make your zucchini have warts from the yellow crookneck. You know, it will if you save those seeds and then grow them the next year, then you're going to see the effects of the cross-pollination, but it doesn't affect this year's fruits. And that's pretty much the same across the board with most things. I have heard, and I think it is possible a little bit sometimes, that pepper, like sweet peppers, can become a little bit hot, like just because I've seen that anecdotally. But it's not something that is super common. And here's another example with brassicas of scientific names. So here we have the genus and species. The genus is Brassica and the species is Oleracea. And the common name for that, you know, you could have broccoli, cabbage, Brussels sprouts, cauliflower, collards, kale, kohlrabi. They're all Brassica oleracea. And so this is where it becomes really important, actually, when you're saving seeds, to know what scientific name is, so that you know if it's going to cross-pollinate or not. And my real general rule of thumb is that, you know, if it shares the same genus and species, it may cross-pollinate. But if it's the same genus and a different species, it probably won't cross-pollinate. And so, you know, with the Brassica genus, there's a whole lot of different brassicas. There's the Brassica oleracea, but there's also a Brassica napus. There's a Brassica nigra. There's a few more, and I'm blanking on them. But so you can still grow, like if you were going to save seeds from all of these, you can still grow a wide variety usually, and have enough to eat from and save seeds from. And this is, you know, again, like if you were going to grow all of these different Brassica oleraceas in your garden, you can still do that and then just only leave the broccoli to go to seed. But you'd have to pull out all the others by the time they're flowering, or else you're going to get cross-pollination. So it's really an interesting thing because, you know, essentially all of these are botanically the same, and they've just been selected by humans for thousands of years for the different eating qualities. Okay. So here's my rule of thumb, just written up there. Okay, that varieties with the same genus and species may cross-pollinate, but plants of the same genus and different species will usually not cross. And so that's an example there, again, with 3 different squash varieties that you could grow in a seed-saving garden and they won't cross-pollinate. And so that is exactly what we do on our farm. And we have 40 acres that are, and we have 5 or 6 different fields that are separated by various distances to keep our seeds true to type. So in each field is about a quarter to a half acre. And so I will grow these 3 different squashes in one field, and then in another field I'll grow 3 different squashes. And so we actually have the capacity to grow like 9 different squash varieties on our farm, and they're separated by enough distance where we don't see cross-pollination. So now we have an understanding of pollination and scientific names. And is there any questions on that before we move on? So I wrote here connecting the dots. And so like, how do we use that information to keep our seeds true to type? And really that's bringing us to isolation distances in the seed garden. And this is a great picture here of a really small seed garden at our local school garden in Manton, where I'm from. And it's a pretty small garden that we've put in with the kids, only 50 by 50 maybe. But this last couple of years, we've planted with seed saving in mind. And so what does that mean? It means we've grown one of each of those 3 different squashes, a Cucurbita maxima, a Cucurbita moschata, a Cucurbita pepo. And then we've also grown 1 variety of watermelon, 1 variety of cantaloupe or honeydew type melon, and 1 variety of cucumber. Because, you know, all cucumbers are the same genus and species. So if you grow 3 different cucumbers all together, they're going to cross-pollinate. So it limits you a little bit. But being able to save the seed is a definite benefit. You just think of it as another crop, you know. A lot of people, I hear people say, oh, my lettuce has gone to seed, or oh, I missed that zucchini and it turned into a marrow. And I'm like, yeah, that's great. I think it's the exciting part when things start to go to seed. So, you know, in this garden, we also planted like 1 kind of sunflower. We planted a lot of different flowers. We planted like 1 kind of turnip, and it's been really, really awesome to do seed saving with kids. And we're starting a little seed library locally in our town with the kids. And we actually hope to do some seed swapping with other school gardens. So if any of you who are watching this are into that kind of thing, you can get a hold of me. But so isolation distances are essentially like, how far would I have to isolate these crops to keep them true to type? So as a general rule of thumb, inbreeders, your self-pollinated plants, can be planted much closer together without much risk of cross-pollination, like 5 to 30 feet. And then your outbreeders, they definitely need more isolation distances. And, you know, if there's a lot of conflicting sources on this, if you get on the internet and read or find books, you know, they're going to say, oh, you need to isolate your corn by 2 miles, or and that's a really long distance. And I think that, and after, you know, I've been doing this for almost 20 years, and on our farm, we isolate our crops anywhere from about 1/4 mile to 1/2 mile from each other, the outbreeders. It's definitely not the 2 miles. I feel like you really grow to your circumstances. So if you are planting really intensely, like a really diversified garden, I think that helps cut down on isolation distances, because the insects are going to lots of different places, you know. They have a lot of different nectar sources. And so if you have, I've got some tips here. If you've got like trees or houses or trap crops, or highly diversified gardens, you know, that can all decrease the amount of isolation that's needed. And by trap crops, I mean, like sometimes in one of my 1/4 acre gardens, I'll plant a huge like row of buckwheat down the middle, and the insects just like flock to that. And so instead of maybe going from, you know, pepper A to pepper B, they're going to stop at the buckwheat first and load up on buckwheat pollen. That's, you know, so those kinds of things. Or if you have houses or trees, you know, if you're growing in your home garden and you want to try to grow 2 different kinds of Cucurbita pepos, you know, and you grow one on one side of your house and one on the other side of your house, and you have a lot of other things flowering, you might get away with it and get fairly true to type seed. Because you know, for myself as a commercial seed grower, I really am trying to keep my seeds true to type. But in the big scheme of things with seed saving, you know, a little bit of genetic diversity isn't a bad thing necessarily. In fact, like that genetic diversity might just, you know, give your variety more heat tolerance or make it tastier, or, you know, so when you're saving seeds for yourself on a home level, you don't maybe need to be quite as careful sometimes, is what I'm saying. You can sort of push these isolation distances and play with them. And, you know, then you step up a notch. And if you're starting to save seeds for your local seed library, then yeah, you might want to pay attention a bit more and isolate your crops as well as you can, really. And then there's also something really cool is that you can isolate some crops, like corn, by timing. So these 3 pictures down here at the bottom are some of our summer garden fields, and you can kind of see, you see a lot of squashes in them. So in each of our fields, I can grow, you know, one of those, each of the 3 squash species, and then I grow 1 cucumber, 1 watermelon, and 1 melon, and 1 corn, and usually 1 sunflower. And that's a repetition that I do 3 times on the farm. So there are different varieties of each in each garden. And with the corn especially, I not only do I isolate it by distance, but I also isolate it by timing. And so I'll choose corns that some of them are long season, some of them are short season, and I'll plant my first corn like around May 15th or May 10th or so. And usually it's my shortest season corn. And then again, around the 1st of June, I'll plant another variety. And then towards the end of June, I'll plant my last variety of corn, so that they're actually tasseling and at different times. And not only will the distance prevent their cross-pollination, but also the timing of their pollen release will prevent that. And I've seen some people do that really successfully on a home seed saving level with like summer squashes or something. Like summer squashes, they produce so quickly that you could get a crop of them in, you know, as soon as the ground's warm enough, and let them turn into marrows, you know, and then plant another variety of them later in the season, and eat from them and save seeds from them. So okay, so let's see. Next, yeah, go ahead.
I have a question.
Yeah.
If I can interrupt you.
Yeah,
You
please.
mentioned buckwheat for trap crops. Do you have
Mhm.
any other suggestions or ideas that you guys use on the farm for?
Yeah.
I'm intrigued by that idea of trap crops.
Yeah.
On a small
Yeah.
farm.
You know, it's a trap crop, and it's also just like a crop for the pollinators, you know. And so I often plant really big beds of zinnias in a couple of different places, and those also really attract pollinators. So anything that just attracts a lot of pollinators, you know, over the years, you know, it used to be that like if you couldn't eat it, I didn't grow it. But about, I don't know, 7 or 8 years ago, I started growing a lot more flowers, and I grew my first zinnias. I was like, wow, why haven't I done this before? And so, yeah, I plant a lot of different flower crops pretty much everywhere. And yeah, buckwheat's something that you could buy a packet of buckwheat from me. There's only like 50 seeds in it. You can also get like a pound of bulk buckwheat seed from somewhere. And I will like go along the edges of my beds where the irrigation leaks and sprinkle buckwheat seed. So it's something that I sprinkle all over. Lacy physalia is really loved by pollinators, especially bumblebees. That's something that's really great. Last year, I experimented with planting sweet alyssum, and I didn't save the seeds from it because they fall out so easily. But that's another great one that you can just sprinkle seed if you can get some of it in bulk. And I planted it because I ended up getting thrips pretty badly in my bean crops. And so I interplanted the sweet alyssum into the beans because I had read that it attracts a certain predator wasp that preys on thrips. And it did maybe seem to work a little bit, and it definitely provided a lot of great pollination. So I think it's something that's a little bit, you know, whatever flowering plants grow well in your climate zone are good ones to try for that. So, so the other consideration is population. So, probably a lot of people have had experience with growing corn, and maybe you only didn't, and not having it pollinate very well, or maybe people have seen that. But so corn is especially one that is very sensitive. If you don't have enough corn plants, then very quickly the seed that you save will start to lose vigor, because it doesn't have the genetic diversity it needs to maintain vigor. So the rule of thumb with corn is that you need at least 100 plants, and that can be, you know, that can be bent a little bit too. I'm into bending the seeds when you can, but generally about 50 to 100 plants is the recommendation for outbreeders, and for inbreeders 10 to 50 plants. And so this is, you know, because crops that are outbreeders, they've through the ages, you know, that's how they've developed, is through cross-pollination from other plants of their variety. And so they're much more sensitive to what's called inbreeding depression. Whereas the self-pollinating plants, you know, essentially you can, and I don't really recommend it, but you could like save seeds from one tomato that's really amazing, and you're going to catch most of the genetic material there, you know. So, and on a home seed saving level, if you're just saving seeds for yourself, then yeah, you can do that. You can just save seeds from a couple of your best tomatoes and, you know, one lettuce plant, and you're going to get a lot of seed, and you're going to be able to, you know, save money on buying seeds. If you are saving seeds for a seed library, then, you know, you want to up that. You're going to want to save seeds from, you know, 5 to 10 lettuce plants, so that you do get some of the genetic diversity there. You're going to save seeds, you know, if you have 20 tomato plants planted, and, you know, 3 of this type and 3 of that, then you're going to try to get, you know, 20 tomatoes off of all 3 plants, you know. So it's all about trying to get enough genetic material in there, because like I said before, you know, that genetic diversity is really important for seed saving and for plants into the future, you know, because that genetic diversity might throw up the mutation that's going to let that plant survive in extreme heat, something like that. And so we don't want to lose that. And then on the other side of the screen there, I have the isolation distances for purity, and these are like kind of general, you know, but for outbreeders, 300 feet up to 2 miles. And then for inbreeders, it's like 10 feet up to 50 feet. So, and that's not to say, you know, if I was saving seed in my home garden and I had 20 tomato plants and they don't have isolation in between them, I'm still going to save seed from them. You know, with your inbreeders, you can do that with your tomatoes and beans and peas. So I also wrote down there, you know, you want to make sure that you're saving seeds from the best plants and fruits, because you got to remember that you are selecting, every time you save seeds, you're selecting, you know, for the quality, the flavor, you're selecting for the production of future crops. So I had it explained to me a long time ago as a bell curve, and I really like that that visualization, that when you, like, say you planted a big bed of carrots, most of the roots are going to fall in the middle. They're decent, they're good, they're, you know, and then you're going to have some carrots that you dig up and you're like, wow, these are exceptional, they're really good carrots. And then you're going to have the ones that are just the runts, you know, that are stunted. And so what can easily happen if you're trying to eat and save seeds, like you can definitely eat seed crops. People ask me that all the time. Like, so do you eat your seed crops, or do you have a kitchen garden? And I don't have a separate kitchen garden. We just eat from our seed crops, and we've learned how to do that. But it can happen if you're out there and you're like, okay, I'm gonna save seeds from these carrots, but then you just start eating all the best carrots. You're like, oh, there's a big one. I'm gonna pull that one up. Oh, there's a big one. You know, you go out there every day over the season and you pull out all the big ones, and then you just save seeds from all the small ones. Well, you're not moving your bell curve towards the good end. You're moving your bell curve towards, you know, the runty end. And so as seed savers, our goal is to move the bell curve to the good end. Instead of eating all the good carrots, you want to actually like select those are the ones that I'm going to save seeds from. And in that sort of situation, I would actually recommend, like, if you had a 10-foot bed of carrots, I would just say, okay, I'm going to eat from this 6 feet of bed. I'm going to leave the other 4 feet, and I'm going to select the best carrots from those 4 feet to go to seed. With something like carrots, we actually, like, I will plant my seed carrots in the middle of the summer in Northern California under row cover to get good germination. And then I dig them up in about December or January and dig up the whole crop, and I select for the best carrots. And then I replant the very best 100 or 200 carrots. And those are the ones that go to seed. And I plant them at like 2-foot spacing, so they have plenty of room. Because if you've ever seen a carrot go to seed, they get like 5 or 6 feet tall and really, really bushy. So, okay. I think I better move on. Laura, what's a time check? I don't even have a watch on me right now.
Yeah, so it's 1:52.
Oh, geez. Okay.
So we don't have
I'm
as much
sorry.
time.
Can I keep going, or?
I think keep going. You know, if people have to drop off, that's fine, but
Okay.
we are recording it, and you know,
Okay.
yeah,
Okay. I'm sorry. I guess I'm a little more long-winded than I had intended to be. So these forms, these are what Laura sent out in the registration, and you guys are welcome to download these from my website or off of that form and use them. This is information that I put together like over 10 years ago from various sources and my own seed saving experience. And it has, you know, kind of basic recommendations for isolation, for population, if it's an outbreeder or an inbreeder, and the scientific names. So, okay. And so now I do want to end up today by talking about seed harvesting. I've talked a lot about the methods for keeping your seeds true to type, but a huge part of it all is actually the harvesting and the processing and what's known as seed cleaning the seeds. So basically there are 2 different approaches depending on the crop. You either process your seeds wet or you process them dry. And so the crops that are processed wet would be tomatoes, squash, melons, cucumbers, peppers, eggplants, and I'm sure there's some more too that I don't have on that list. And then dry, your carrots, your onions, lettuce, beans, sunflowers, all the brassicas, peas, beets, spinach, anything that you're going to harvest dry. And so all of those things on the dry side, you need to actually let them dry on the plant to the best of their ability. And some things you can cheat with a little more than others, like corn. I definitely every year harvest my corn before it's totally dry, because if I don't, the birds and the wood rats will eat it. But things like beans, you really need to let the bean pods, you know, 95% dry, 90% dry on the vines. You know, I've definitely had people who pick green bean pods and are trying to save the seeds from it, and those just won't work. And then with the wet seed harvesting, the basics of wet processing are shown in these pictures, where you're going to harvest the fruits, whatever they may be, and you either cut them open and scoop out the seeds, or you smash them to release the seeds. Everything's a little bit different. I think that, you know, summer squash and cucumbers are the ones that you harvest it when they're inedible. You know, cucumbers, you want to let them get really big and yellow. And summer squash, they're going to turn into those huge marrows, or really lumpy, warty, like with yellow crooknecks. And then you're going to use water to separate the seed from the flesh, and screens can definitely help. I have a lot of random screens. I also invested in like nicer stainless steel mesh screens some years ago. But as new seed savers or experienced seed savers, you know, just collecting random screens helps a lot. And then the rule of thumb is that usually the good seeds, they sink to the bottom of your tote bin or bucket, whatever you're using. And then you can use water and pour off the hollow seed and any of the plant material. And then we dry our seeds on screen and in the shade. And we usually do that step outside because we have, you know, these really long, dry falls usually. And so, but really you want them to be warm, dry, and good air circulation for drying your seeds. For small amounts of seeds, you can definitely use like ceramic plates inside in your cupboard or on top of your, you know, on your counter. I've done that quite a lot for small amounts of seeds. So these are pictures here of tomatoes, and tomatoes are pretty unique because they also need a fermentation. So actually tomatoes and cucumbers really need that fermentation. And then squash, squash is fermented often because it makes it easier to separate the plant material. Oops. So the steps for fermenting is the same. You're going to smash your fruits or scoop out the seeds. So with cucumbers, I usually just cut them in half and scoop the seed into a bucket. Tomatoes, I usually just smash them up because I'm harvesting full buckets at a time. But in the kitchen, if you've harvested 20 tomatoes, you can definitely like slice them open and just kind of squeeze out the seeds into a bowl and save the seeds, and then still use the fleshy bit for your tomato sauce or whatever you're going to make. And so for tomatoes and cucumbers, you want to let the seeds ferment in their own juices for 2 to 4 days, 3 to 4 days, really for tomatoes. I usually ferment my tomatoes for a little bit longer than cucumbers. And if you've looked at a cucumber or a tomato seed, you will have seen that it has like a jelly sac around it. And the fermentation breaks down that jelly sac. And my understanding is that the jelly sac, it has germination inhibitors in it. I've used to wonder, like, why don't these seeds germinate inside of this nice, moist, warm, dark tomato? You know, it's because there's germination inhibitors. And so the fermentation process breaks those down and it removes the jelly sac. And it also can help treat against any disease that might be present. And so then after that fermentation period where you're actually stirring it every day, you don't want to just let it get really nasty on top. I always keep it stirred. After that you're going to add water at this point, and then the water, all of the plant material and bad seeds like will float, and you can just pour those off. So the photo there is like what my yard looks like during seed saving time. It's kind of like some Pollock artwork on the ground with different plant material and tomatoes especially. And so the good seed will sink. It's like panning for gold. It's super fun doing tomato seed. And then with squash, you will add some water too. When you do the initial ferment, you actually add water because it's really dry, and it's basically the same process. But with squash, it's like you can also just cut open the squash in your kitchen and clean the seed in a colander and dry it on a plate. You know, it doesn't really require this fermentation. It's more like on a large scale, it makes it a little easier for the seed cleaning. So next is your dry processing, and the big term here is winnow. You're going to winnow the seed. So you have to thresh it, and then you're going to winnow it and use screens. And so now on our seed farm, you know, we've started off just with a lot of random screens and a fan, like a box fan. for all of our seed processing. And then slowly over the years, we've gotten some better equipment. We now have a Winnow Wizard. That's an amazing contraption that was created by seed growers in Oregon. The machine there in the middle, it's a hand crank. And so you put your seed in the hopper and you crank it, and it blows the chaff away, and the good seed falls out the chutes. And then the seed machine on the other side there, the plexiglass tube, that's called an Oregon seed blower. And it's really great for really small seeds like chamomile or yarrow. And you can put the seed in the cup, and then the light seed is blowing into the cups at the top. So it's all about, with dry seeded stuff, it's all about separating like the heavier seed, the denser seed, which is generally the more viable seed, from the light seed material and the plant material. And so the first step of that is always going to be to thresh your seed. And so you can see in these pictures that I use old bed sheets, and I'll go out in the field and I'll cut down like all the brassica stalks or throw all the beans in them. And then we bring them back and we do a lot of stomping. Honestly, you know, we stomp with our feet. We use our hands to break open stuff. Most seeds are pretty hardy. Sometimes like onion seeds are a little more delicate. You don't want to like be stomping things so vigorously that you damage seed. But we don't see that too much. And it's a really fun activity to involve kids in. So there we go. And I'm going to try to play this video here. So this is a video of me winnowing. And if you get, I have some links at the end. And if you get on my Instagram, and I mean, I put up a lot of videos last year of seed cleaning techniques. So this is one of those. But basically, to winnow with a fan, you can see there I've got a little fan set up, and I'm holding a bowl full of seed, and there's a bucket underneath. And so you can also just do this on a windy day. But the basic premise is that the wind created by the fan will blow the plant material away, and you'll be left with the seeds. So I think. There we go.
So the seeds are falling into the bucket?
Yeah, they are. The seeds fall into the bucket. You probably couldn't hear the audio again. Could you guys
No,
hear
we
that?
didn't hear the
No,
audio.
that's weird. But you can see the video. So yeah, the seeds fall into the bucket, and any chaff or plant material blows away. And that's like the basic way to clean all dried seeds. Is you can do this with lettuce, you can do this with peas and beans. You can have a big fan or a small fan. Usually I would recommend setting up a sheet on the ground in front of the ground bucket or tote bin to catch anything that you might have blown away inadvertently, like if your fan's too strong or whatever, you know. And you can always adjust the distance of the bucket from the fan to blow things away, depending on how small your seed is. So, oh, there we go. Okay. I do want to talk quickly about seed storage. Basically, the rule of thumb is cool, dry, and dark. So you're going to want to, you know, protect your seed stores from light and heat and dampness. And right now we are storing our seeds in like these 4mm plastic bags in cupboards. And I have gone through a lot of different phases of storing seeds in glass jars or in tote bins. And this is just how we're doing it right now. And it works really well. Because where we are in California, I don't really deal with a lot of excess humidity. So I'm not putting like moisture packets in the bags. But I know some people do that. I know some people like to store seeds in refrigerators or freezers, and I've never really done that. The moisture is always a bit of a concern with me. So if you think about doing that, you know, make sure that you're protecting them from moisture that might be present in a refrigerator, especially. So yeah, I think that's pretty much
have
it,
a-
you guys. I kind of blew through the end there, but I can do some questions.
Yeah, we have a question in the chat. I'll read it to
Great.
you. Can you save seeds that overwintered on the stem in the rain? Example, marigolds, etc.
They're probably not going to be in great shape, but they might germinate. I mean, you could definitely give it a go because, you know, in nature, what happens in nature is a tomato falls on the ground and then the next year, you know, rots on the ground and it germinates and comes up and volunteers next year. So you could give it a go, but the seed might have been ruined. It's generally better to harvest it in the fall. I do find that seeds will withstand some rain in the fall. You know, sometimes like, oh shoot, it's gonna rain. I'm out there trying to harvest everything, but I don't get everything in and then they just dry out again and they're fine. So yeah. This slide here, it has my contact information. It has a link on my website. If you go on our website, you can easily find some seed saving information. And I also threw up the website for the Organic Seed Alliance, and they've been a great asset for me over the years and source of education. They have field days and a lot of great seed saving guides on their website. And then you're also welcome to follow me on Instagram and Facebook. I try to post a lot of good seed saving and general gardening information. So yeah. That's a lot of information in a short amount of time. So I'm happy to stay on and answer any questions about specific crops, like, well, how do you save seeds from X, Y, and Z, or anything that you'd like to have clarified.
Any questions in the room here?
I have a question.
We have one question.
Okay.
What is, for kids, what's some of the easiest plants or seeds to, it's like easy to grow the plant, it's easy to harvest the seed and process it. It's easy to plant and have it grow. It's sort of like
Yeah, I understand.
Yeah.
Well, I would recommend things like beans and peas. The seeds are easy to grasp and easy to plant. You could plant peas right now in Northern California and probably start putting beans in the ground by I don't know, mid to late April in a lot of places. Sunflowers are really easy to grow and fairly easy to get the seeds out of too. My kids really love growing turnips, the little white Tokyo market turnips. They love to eat them. Those do need to go through a winter cycle, so but that's a fun one for them to grow. And yeah, I'd say beans and peas and sunflowers are a great place to start. Tomatoes are really fun though too, for like the squishing up of the seeds and then swishing them around to get the seeds out of the bottom.
You. If there aren't any more questions, I'm not seeing, there's a lot of thank yous and kudos in the chat that you
Okay.
can read, Kaylin. But I'm not seeing
Yeah, okay.
questions.
Okay.
I do want to just highlight our Colusa County Seed Catalog that's online, and I have 2 printed copies here. In the catalog for our seed library, we include all of the scientific names for each variety, because we want people to be thinking about seed saving. You don't have to return seeds. You don't have to save seeds from the seeds that you use in the seed library. You can just grow them and harvest them and enjoy. But if you do want to get into seed saving, we have tried to make that part of it easier. And that's why I wanted to have this class with Kaylin. So just throwing a plug, we have beans, peas, lettuce, and tomatoes all in our seed catalog. So I wanted to start with the stuff that is easier to grow and harvest the seed. I myself feel like a total beginner. Like I've only done lettuce and tomatoes and peas. So yeah, I haven't ventured into the outbreeder world yet, but I think this is really exciting stuff for me. And I think in Colusa County especially, we have tons of gardeners and very advanced master gardeners here. So hopefully they get a lot out of this. But I guess we will close up the Zoom class. I want to thank you, Kaylin, for giving this class today, and everyone who joined online and in the room here with me. In the room, we had a little bit of audio issue, but I think overall we got the information, and this recording will be posted on Kaylin's YouTube at some point in the future. So this will be a resource for all of us to reference in the many seasons to come. And one more plug for our funders, the California State Arts Council and their Upstate Creative Core program, which provided the grant for this seed library as well as the class today. So many thanks to our funders. And with that, I hope that you all are enjoying this amazing 70-degree weather that we have here, at least here in Colusa. It's quite a nice day and afternoon, and thank you all for joining us.
Excellent. Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you, Laura.
And no wind, I know.
All right. Well, thanks so much, Laura. I think that was great.
Yes, thank you so much. This was
Yeah.
wonderful.
Good.
I'll be
All
in
right. Well, have a
when we have
yeah,
the
be in touch
recording.
with the recording, and I'll figure out how to put that up on my YouTube.
Perfect.
And yeah, go for it. Save some outbreeders.
I'm encouraged, yes. Okay, thank you. Bye.
Okay. All right. Take care. Bye.